There it is. He timed it right.
Counting to explode with the left. Oh, and that right, but Davis took off some of the steam of the punch, but still.
Welcome to the motherfucking lady. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Virgil Ortiz versus Ennis is almost set for April clash. There is a lot of optimism on both sides that the junior middleweight matchup could get finalized this week, and that the fight would take place in April in Las Vegas. The Ring's Mike Copinger reported on Monday's episode of Inside the Ring on DAZN. Ortiz, 24-0 with 22 KOs, and Ennis, 35-0 with 31 KOs, have been embroiled in a back-and-forth negotiation in recent months, and the process became even more complicated once Ortiz sued his promoter, Golden Boy, last month. Ortiz and Ennis have been focused on a fight against each other ever since Ortiz knocked out Erickson Lubricant in 2 rounds on November 8th. Immediately after the fight ended, Ennis and promoter Eddie Hearn entered the ring and kicked off the build-up with a face-to-face confrontation. Ennis, a former Ring, IBF, and WBA welterweight champion, made his junior middleweight debut in October with a first-round knockout against Tszyu. Ortiz is the Ring's #1 rated fighter in the division. Ennis is ranked 5th. I don't agree with Virgil Ortiz being ranked at #1 when the man's been there for 2 years and has yet to fight for a title. I don't think wins over Sergey Boachuk and Israel Madrimov are enough to warrant that rank. I would say that Josh Kelly's win over unbeaten Bakram Murtazaliev means a lot more. I would say Xander Zayas' recent win over Abbas Baru, then WBA champion, means a lot more. I don't think that Virgil should be ranked at #1. I don't think that Jaron Ennis should be ranked at #5. Not when all he's done at the weight is a win over an unheralded Tszyu. But that's neither here nor there. That's just where Ring Magazine ranks them.
Are they really gonna fight?
If they managed to get this fight over the line, to go down as soon as April, that really would come as a surprise to me, because I figured that this isn't going to happen no time soon, and if it does happen, it might be at 160, not at 154. So if they manage to get it done...
That's a shocker.
Theater of the unexpected. We know this is a fight DAZN really wanted to put together, likely to spruce up their ultimate tier package. They need to justify charging people even more than they normally do. They're doing more pay-per-views now, in case you haven't noticed. Later on this month, you've got Garcia versus Barrios. That's a pay-per-view. There's probably going to be another one in March. They just haven't announced it yet. And in April, presumably. Don't forget about Wilder versus Chisora. I think that's supposed to be a pay-per-view also. In the month of April, you may end up with 2 pay-per-views. Wilder versus Chisora and, God willing, Ortiz versus Ennis. DAZN is doing a lot more pay-per-views than they used to, and because of that, they've offered up what's supposed to be a cheaper alternative to just buying each pay-per-view individually, their ultimate tier, which would run you about $400 and change. If you purchase the ultimate tier, you get them all as part of the package, but it's still on the pricier end of the spectrum, asking what remaining boxing fans there are in the United States to kick out over $400 in one lump sum for a bit of boxing.
It's a lot.
Would seem that DAZN has drifted far, far away from what their initial sales pitch was, because their initial sales pitch was that pay-per-view is dead. Fast forward, now they're doing a minimum of at least 1 pay-per-view every month. I don't think Ennis versus Ortiz should even be a pay-per-view. I don't think either of them have the kind of following that warrants the paywall, but the bar of standard for what constitutes what's pay-per-view worthy and what isn't has lessened in recent years, and we have Al Heyman to thank for that, the inflation we currently see in the market. For me, this fight has not even been built up enough for it to be behind a paywall. The fight itself, it's a good fight. Good stylistic matchup, boxer-puncher versus pressure fighter, which tends to favor the boxer-puncher. That would be Boots. Where it's intriguing is that even though Boots has the stylistic advantage, Virgil has the deeper resume. He's fought the better opponents. He is arguably the more proven fighter of the two. We don't know how durable he is because his resume's paper thin. What if Virgil gets in with one of those hooks or one of those body shots? How well is Boots going to take it? Said it before and I'll say it again. Even in fights that Boots is winning, he takes punches. Can he take some from Virgil?
Power!
That is a question that this fight aspires to answer.
Power!
Saying it, Fight Talk saw moving in the right direction. They're close to finalizing the fight as soon as this week. We'll see if they do, because they've been talking about this for a while. But still, no dice. Elsewhere in the junior middleweight division, former champions Errol Spence Jr. and Tszyu have a deal in place for summer fight. Kopinger also reported that Tszyu could first take a tune-up fight next month in Australia. Spence, a former IBF, WBA, and WBC welterweight champion, turns 36 next month and hasn't fought since suffering the lone loss of his career against Terence Crawford in July of 2023.
Tim's tune-up fight could come on the same card as Liam Paro versus Lewis Crocker, promoted by No Limit.
Isn't Errol gonna take a tune-up fight?
For Errol, Tszyu is the tune-up fight.
Errol Spence Jr. was dropped 3 times in the undisputed title fight, and the most one-sided bout was stopped in the 9th round. Before the matchup, Spence was a mainstay in the pound-for-pound rankings with wins against Sean Porter, Mikey Garcia, Danny Garcia, Yordenis Ugas, Lamont Peterson, and Kell Brock. In between, Spence battled through injuries sustained in a near-fatal car accident in 2019, and separately, a left retinal detachment in 2021 that scrapped a scheduled fight against Manny Pacquiao. Tszyu, a former junior middleweight champion, is 2-3 over his last 5 fights. The 31-year-old Australian suffered a split decision loss in a bloodbath to Sebastian Fundora in March of 2024 and was brutally stopped in 3 rounds. 7 months later, against Bakram Murtazaliev, Tszyu stopped Joey Spencer inside 4 rounds in April before getting stopped himself in a rematch with Fundora. Then in December, Tszyu got back in the winner's column with a 10-round UD against Anthony Velasquez. He's currently being trained by Pedro Diaz in Miami, where Errol Spence Jr.'s corner situation is still ambiguous. We don't know who's going to be training him. He recently visited with anyone from Stephen Breadman Edwards to more recently Buddy McGirt.
Who do you like for Errol?
Out of those 2, I'd go with Buddy. Stylistically, this is a fantastic fight because both Errol Spence Jr. and Tszyu, at their best, are aggressive come-forward fighters. They're both action fighters. Now, Tim's been trying to add some more bells and whistles to his game, taking a more measured approach now that he's with Pedro Diaz. That was evident in his last fight with Velasquez that ended in a decision, not a knockout.
He's trying to add some more finesse to his repertoire. Errol, we don't know what we're going to get from Errol the next time we see him. We don't know who's going to train him. All we have to go off of is the fighter that he has been up until this point. And up until this point, Errol is a mid-range to inside fighter, combination puncher.
Boxer puncher. I remember Errol had a halfway decent lead, good jab,
Bankable body attack.
those were his strengths, though too close to 3 years removed from the sport of boxing, and when he returns, he's gonna have a new corner. We ain't got no idea what he's gonna look like, how he's gonna fight, but he'll be shaking off ring rust if he doesn't take a tune-up in between. And based on the current state of affairs at the PBC, I'm not even sure they could get him one. It's easier to schedule filler fights and tune-up fights when you have a network backing you, but they don't. Been saying it for 2 years now. Amazon is not making the investment in the PBC that Showtime and Fox once did, so they're reduced to doing pay-per-views almost exclusively. And who's going to buy a pay-per-view to see Errol tune up?
Isn't Tim a tune-up?
Yeah, but Tszyu is a box office fighter in his country, so that adds that arm of revenue to the pot with the added appeal that Errol Spence Jr. is back, and he's fighting a former champion. Supposed to be coming back over the summer months. I think the odds makers will have Errol as the betting favorite going in, even though he's in his mid-30s and hasn't fought in close to 3 years.
He'd come back against Tszyu because to a lot of people, Tszyu at this point is not what he once was, and he's damaged goods. The 2 losses to Sebastian, the brutal beating at the hands of Bakram, people think he's a cherry ripe for the picking.
Damaged goods.
But something similar can be said about Errol Spence Jr. based on the beating that he took the last time we saw him, and that he's in his mid-30s, having not fought in close to 3 years. That makes the fight intriguing.
Errol was also called out by his old drinking buddy, Jermel Charlo, but he brushed off the call-out from Jermel, saying that he's just strapped for cash. I think if Errol Spence Jr. is coming back after all this time, so is he. And I don't know how much money there is in a Charlo fight. If I had to guess, I'd say there's more money for Errol in a Josh Kelly fight, a Conor Benn fight.
Because who's supposed to put together a Charlo fight? The PBC?
Matchroom has more means and more resources than they do to put together either a Conor Benn fight or a Josh Kelly fight, and I think they would be receptive to a Spence fight. For Errol Spence Jr., coming back against Tszyu is a means to an end. It's just a segue to something bigger. I don't get the impression that Errol's coming back to fight for anybody's belts. Not specifically. Him coming back would also make him a prime target for the winner of Boots versus Ortiz. He would also be coming back at a very opportune time when Turkey El Sheikh is still throwing big cash to make big fights.
Could be his motivation. Being on the PBC side of things, though, he could always target the winner of Fundora versus Thurman, but as stated, you're only gonna make so much money fighting them.
If it were about fighting Sebastian Fundora, he already had that opportunity and he chose to sit out even longer.
Fighting Fundora ain't gonna get you no real money.
There is value in the ring return of Errol Spence Jr. Boxing fans oftentimes being sentimental, they do love a good comeback story. And if Errol can come back from the beating he took at the hands of Terrence close to 3 years ago, there's money in that.
There could be. But it all hinges on not just Errol making it past Tszyu, but how well he looks in the fight.
Be competing above the welterweight limit, where at welterweight, he was one of the bigger guys on the bigger end of the spectrum. At junior middle, he's not going to be so big. There's a lot of guys at that weight much bigger than him. Competing above 147, now at 154, he will have to tread carefully to get something extra out of a career that I thought was all but over.
If you would have asked me 12 months ago, do I think Errol's coming back? I would have said no.
Would have asked me that more than 12 months ago, 2 years ago, I would have said the same thing.
No.
I don't think Errol is coming back because the fire has been rekindled and he's got the itch. I think he's coming back because he has to. 2.5, close to 3 years away from the sport. He may have burned through a lot of his money.
No, he has to make more.
But it is intriguing. Men's cruiserweight news. David Benavidez skips Opetaia as cruiserweight titles loom. David Benavidez's cruiserweight jump to 200 pounds in May is looking like a selective risk. He's gunning for Zurdo Ramirez's WBA and WBO titles, then dipping back to light heavyweight for Bivol or Better Beef before facing the division's real beast.
They're calling it selective on the premise that David actually does boil back down to 175 after making his cruiserweight debut, but I don't think that he's going to. One look at David Benavidez in between fights and you can see this guy walks around at 2 and change. He has to cut down to get to cruiser. So do I think after he does, he's going to cut down some more to get back to light heavy? Nope. Especially after Dmitry Bivol himself said last week that he has intentions of moving up to the cruiserweight division. Thus, for David, moving down for him isn't even necessary. So while they're calling it selective, that David's talking about going back to light heavy, I don't actually think he's going to. I think it's much ado about nothing.
I saw David Benavidez the other day say that the walls are closing in on all these other guys who don't want to fight him, when in reality, the walls are closing in on him. Because after you win those 2 alphabet titles, Jai Opetaia is going to be looking at you, and Dmitry Bivol, when he moves up, he's going to be looking at you too.
I think he's got it backwards.
I'm going to win the 2 titles. I'm going to become unified champion at cruiserweight, and then I will become the face of boxing.
Do you believe there's an opening for someone to be the face of boxing? And there's David Benavidez.
It's wide open, and that's why I'm training extremely hard. That's why I'm extremely motivated for this fight, you know, and it was a blessing to get the date, May 2nd. And then now I'm fighting Zurdo Ramirez, and, you know, I'm training extremely hard, and I don't only want to be called the face of boxing, I want to earn that. So with this victory, I'm going to go in there, I'm going to put everything into the ring. I'm going to put a phenomenal performance on. I'm going to win the 2 titles. I'm going to become unified champion at cruiserweight, and then I will become the face of boxing.
No, I don't think simply beating Zurdo will be enough for David Benavidez to ascend and become the face of boxing, because Dmitry Bivol already beat Zurdo, and he didn't become the face of boxing. Not only that, he actually beat the face of boxing in Canelo Alvarez, but still.
Nobody calls Dmitry the face of boxing, so why would they call you that? For David to ascend and really assume that role, I feel like He would have to beat Zerto, he would have to beat Dimitri, he would have to beat Jai Opetaia. It would take a lot, because it took a lot from Canelo to get to that point.
Canelo Alvarez, before anybody started calling him the face of boxing, had already shared the ring with the likes of Austin Trout, Erislandy Lara, Floyd Mayweather, Miguel Cotto, Gennady Golovkin, Liam Smith.
Took a lot.
Didn't happen overnight. And it's not really until the second Gennady Golovkin fight that you started to see people calling Canelo the face of boxing. But think about how far along he was by then. Well over 40 fights. A champion at 2 weights.
Many successful pay-per-views.
Think about how many pay-per-views Canelo Alvarez sold by the time that he fought Gennady Golovkin for a second time. And compare that to where David Benavidez is now. And there's a great disparity there to where I don't even think David can become the face of boxing.
That doesn't mean he can't have a successful career. That doesn't mean he can't be accomplished. But becoming the face of boxing really isn't an exact science.
It's not a given. It's not like you fight a certain guy or a certain number of fights, win a certain number of belts. Sometimes it boils down to outlying factors that you don't have control over, like the state at the weight, what opponents are around.
Not just ability,
but availability. In the cruiserweight division, which is not a division that most Americans really watch, it's top-heavy up there, because after you talk about Zerto and Jai, and maybe Noel, the talent pool just sort of drops off after that, and there are not that many known fighters. If David Benavidez is going to be campaigning as a cruiser, moving forward, that particular division would not offer him that much to choose from beyond Zerto and Jai.
Dimitri, if and when he moves up.
But at the very most, that's just 3 fights you're talking about. That's not a lot. And that's if David even wins those fights. I like his chances against Zerto, not so much against Jai Opetaia or Dimitri Bivol. Dimitri might take him to school, like he took Zerto to school, and Jai might flatline him.
I've said it before, and I'll say it again. The foundations have not been laid for David Benavidez to assume the role of the face of boxing.
Now, he can win some belts and make some money. He can do that. He can have an accomplished career. But the face of boxing? Yeah, that's something else.